First wave of U.S. troops arriving at the southern border, part of President Trump's plan to crack down on immigration. Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce starts us off. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, immigration was central to President Trump's campaign, and this morning his administration is eager to show he is following through, signing a flurry of executive orders, sending troops to the southern border and highlighting ICE raids. Along the southern border this morning, signs of President Trump's long-promised crackdown on immigration.
Unironically, having ospreys anywhere near the southern border is infinitely more dangerous than a million Guatemalan migrants with AR-15s coming through, okay? Having multiple ospreys at the southern border, oh my lord, you're gonna kill so many goddamn soldiers, dude. That's crazy. Ospreys go one way, baby, and that's boom, okay? That's down. I'm literally in the country right now where famously one of them was downed like a couple months ago. Ospreys are even worse than Black Hawks. No disrespect to Boeing. It is a very cool looking craft. The reality of the matter is it has too many points of failure. It is far too complicated to maintain, and it is far too complicated for upkeep. And therefore, because of its like insane design, they constantly fall and constantly kill soldiers.
As the 1,500 troops sent to the border begin their new mission. In the air and on the ground, Marines from California's Camp Pendleton now at the border wall with heavy trucks and concertina wire. ABC's Matt Rivers on the scene for their arrival.
So right there, part of the very first steps of the U.S. military being deployed down here, those taking off from Camp Pendleton, making their way down here to the U.S.-Mexico border.
The troops deployed to address what Trump has declared is a national emergency.
What exactly do you want them to be doing right now?
Making sure that the border is safe and secure and that criminals don't come into our country.
The surge in forces comes as the situation on the border has improved steadily since former President Biden announced new asylum restrictions last spring. Encounters between Border Patrol and migrants down 60%. Immigration a top issue in Trump's campaign. The White House now eager to show they're delivering. Across the country in major cities like Boston, New York, and Newark, some communities rattled by ICE raids. The Newark mayor saying he will not stand by idly while people are being unlawfully terrorized. Trump has promised the largest mass deportations in American history. But sources tell ABC News these appear to be routine immigration raids that have been customary for years. Trump has also signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship, even though it's protected by the 14th Amendment.
That's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
But yesterday, a federal judge in Washington temporarily halted the order. Judge John Kuhnauer, appointed by President Reagan, calling it blatantly unconstitutional.
Obviously, we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
And Lulu, let's play some sound from some migrants who made the journey to the U.S.-Mexico border only to discover it's closed to asylum seekers. Let's listen to that.
¿Qué va a pasar? Me viene y me pregunta qué va a pasar. ¿Qué respuesta le doy yo a mi niño? No tengo ninguna respuesta, porque no sé qué va a pasar con nosotros en la calle.
Con este cierre era la única vía que teníamos una manera de llegar legalmente.
Yeah, just for the record, these aren't undocumented migrants, right? These are documented migrants that went through the process of documentation with the Customs and Border Patrol. Like they did the proper, they went through the proper protocols, but they're brown, you know? This is where you're supposed to understand what this entire problem actually is, right? This is a perfect example of this. Another great example of this, like the idea that like undocumented migrants is basically just a catch-all terminology for brown and black migrants in general that the American government does not, or at least like Republicans don't want in the country, was when J.D. Vance talked about the Haitian migrants that were fully documented, had temporary protected status, and were living in Springfield. and contributing to the Springfield economy in meaningful ways, right? Those guys weren't undocumented migrants, but they were called illegal aliens over and over again. Why were they called illegal aliens? Because the reality of the matter is, both sides and virtually everyone, every politician at least, understands the truth. The truth that there isn't any difference between an undocumented migrant and a documented U.S. citizen or a documented migrant in general. The only difference is paperwork. That's the only difference. It's just paperwork. And obviously, the Republican Party has shown once again that that paperwork won't stop them from, changing their legal status and forcibly pushing them out of the country. That's it. This conversation is not about violent crimes and the apprehension of violent criminals, although there are, of course, undocumented migrants, just like natural-born U.S. citizens, or even documented immigrants that do crimes. They're human beings, after all. Every human being has the capacity to do violence. But the reality of the matter is that undocumented migrants and documented non-citizens, documented immigrants are responsible for significantly less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. So that one is already, that concept is already built around a lie. And we also realize that the issue is not about the legal process in which people come into the country through, considering that this is also a legal process. There's got to be a separate reason for why they want to do these apprehensions. And I think it's because this is inherently white nativist. And it's not necessarily because these people that are at the top are card-carrying white nationalists who want to, who secretly say the 14 words or whatever. Some are like that, Stephen Miller. But I think many other people in power just simply use the pre-existing racism and white supremacist opinions to their advantage to consistently undermine the migrant workers coming into the country in an effort to maintain a two-tier labor structure, knowing full well that there is always going to be a flow of people that come in. And as long as they are kept undocumented, they can be easily swept away when companies see fit. Because if you truly, truly, truly wanted to address this issue, if you were a real racist, right? 100%, you're like, I am invested in making America as white as possible, right? If you were a real racist, like a card-carrying racist, you wouldn't go after the undocumented migrants. I mean, you would down the line, but you would actually start off with the companies that hire undocumented migrants. And you would actually create very, very strict rules, not just simply a slap on the wrist, but very strict rules and very strict penalties for hiring undocumented migrants. Yes, the Oregon racism method. Exactly. When Oregon was designed, it was technically an abolitionist state. Why? Because people that moved to Oregon wanted it to be a white state, as in they did not want black people, even as slaves, to be around them. This is why slavery was not allowed in Oregon. If you're a real racist, that is the step that you would take. Like a real racist. You know what I'm saying? Precisely what I think shows the true intentions of the modern Republican Party. This isn't to say that they aren't racist. Of course they are, right? Many people are. At best, they're just careless about the livelihoods and the humanity of all of these people coming into the country from Latin American countries, from China, and many other places. But it's important to understand the true purpose of this. As long as you keep a steady flow of migration that is always going to happen because of our destabilizing efforts in Latin America and South America, and also because of climate change, creating ecological disaster, destroying agricultural work, and further destabilizing these already crippled economies, you are always going to have a steady flow of migrants coming into the United States of America. And you can't recognize their humanity, because if you recognize their humanity, more people will say, oh, we should just document them. I don't understand what the big deal is. And if you document them, then they have legal restitution. They have at least the same limited amount of legal means that the American undocumented worker has. Legal means to demand back pay, legal means to organize, unionize, potentially down the line. But as long as you keep them undocumented and don't punish the corporations other than a simple slap on the wrist, like a little baby tap on the wrist, really, as long as companies can still churn out larger profit margins by hiring undocumented migrants while simultaneously paying the penalty after the fact when they call ICE on their own facilities, because numerous companies do this. It's especially ruthless in the poultry sector. As long as the penalties that you pay to the government is minuscule in comparison to the profits that you get from undocumented migrants rather than a documented labor force, they'll still keep doing it. And the only way to continue having this cycle is by beefing up a healthy dose of white nativist propaganda, constantly dehumanizing migrants, claiming that they are responsible for incredible crimes, violent crimes, heinous crimes all the time. Yeah. Got footage from inside this event. They admit the bill is 100% meant to scare immigrants and beg the crowd to urgently convince your people to not leave Florida since folks in the agriculture industry are mad workers are leaving. The hypocrisy is so brazen and disgusting. This was last year when Ron DeSantis signed an anti-immigrant law in the state of Florida. The Republicans are getting nervous about the community backlash to their voting for DeSantis' anti-immigrant law. They are hosting this event to lie and spin. Folks should go and make sure these politicians hear from people who are angry about the damage they have done. The implications of the Florida law SB 1718. Here's what they said.
This bill is 100% supposed to scare you.
I don't know these are the Florida state representatives openly admitting that the bill is 100% meant to scare immigrants and beg the crowd to urgently convince your people to not leave Florida.
I'm a farmer and the farmers are mad as hell.
Yo soy un agricultor y los agricultores están bien bravos.
We are losing employees. They're already starting to move to Georgia and other states.
Estamos perdiendo empleados y se están mudando a otros estados como Georgia.
It's urgent that you talk to all your people and convince them that you have resources, state representatives, and other people that can explain the bill to you.
Es urgente que ustedes hablen con sus personas porque tenemos representantes estatales que pueden explicarles este proyecto de ley.
We had the best president in my life in the last 30 years, and I'm still supporting Donald Trump. I love my governor. He's the greatest governor. He's the greatest governor in.
Yeah, he was saying, like, don't worry. This is just this bill that we passed, okay, is just to scare immigrants. But you should tell your undocumented migrant workers, just as I have as a farmer, that, like, don't worry, they won't go away, okay? Don't worry, they won't go away. We'll protect them. And a time when they were fearful that the undocumented migrants were like, okay, well, I guess we're not working. You're a farmer? No, he's a farmer. He's saying, as a farmer and a member of the Republican state legislature in the state of Florida, as a person who voted for this anti-immigration bill, I'm telling you that it's purely to scare migrants. Ironically enough, I'm just as much as a farmer as that guy is, and I'm not a farmer at all. You know what I mean? Whenever people talk about farmers in the United States of America, what they're actually talking about are people who own the farm, not people who toil the land, okay? When you're actually talking about the people working in the agricultural side of the business, it's almost entirely comprised of undocumented and documented migrant labor, okay? Whether it be states like California or Texas or Florida, the overwhelming majority of the land is toiled by undocumented laborers and migrants in general, migrants who are also documented on work visas and migrant worker visas. This happened in Alabama in the past as well. If the government truly was operating on pure white nationalist sentiment, like, you know, neo-Nazi style, what they would end up doing is actually punish the business owners. This is another thing that I've routinely talked about in terms of counter messaging. Support for immigration was rising steadily prior to 2021. The recent shift in opinion is a piece of a broader anti-Biden sentiment. Before his presidency collapsed, Biden also broadened the anti-immigrant consensus by convincing MSNBC viewers that restrictionist policy is good. The Democrats didn't engage in a healthy diet of pro-immigrant propaganda, talking about the humanity of these immigrants and talking about how it would be better overall for the entire labor force if they were documented, for example, because they do work as a depressive, like they're not monolithic. Undocumented migrants are not monolithic, but the way that they operate within the confines of the American labor structure is a depressive force on the wages of the documented labor force. Basically, if they had actually counter-messaged against the Republicans that they knew were going to routinely talk about the scourge of immigrants as a political tool that favors them, because it's one that they have often utilized over and over again, right? If they had done that, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would not be in this current situation. We would not be experiencing untold levels of anti-immigrant sentiment, the likes we've never seen before. But here we are. Would you mind explaining how they depress wages? I believe you. I just want to understand better. I mean, easy. If you can get cheaper labor, you're always going to hire cheaper labor. Companies have one thing in mind, and that is to increase profit margins. And undocumented migrants, because they are not documented and have the proper paperwork, create multiple vectors of exploitation, open up multiple vectors of exploitation for companies, right? Number one, they're coming from poorer countries. Okay, so the currency exchange already favors the capital owners in that regard. They can get away with hiring them for cheaper wages in general, as opposed to the American natural-born citizen that wants to work at the same factory. And if you have a group of people that are, even if they were documented, are willing to take jobs for much cheaper, right? Then obviously the company is going to do that. They're going to hire the people that are going to work for cheaper. Now that's with the H-1B visas, for example, an additional vector of exploitation that is born out of the currency exchange rate that favors the American side, right? On top of that, there's also, for H-1B visas, for example, the fear of deportation if you lose your job. If you don't attain your job, especially because sponsorships are also expensive for the company too, to a certain degree, you will get deported. And in that process, you are willing to work longer hours and be, I guess, quote unquote, a more productive employee than the documented American laborer, who also has numerous points of pressure set upon them from, your employment being tied to your health care, or the student loan debts that they probably took on that they have to pay now, right? These are also additional points of pressure that exist for the American wage laborer, right? The documented American wage laborer. But on top of that, because of our supercharged profits and our endless interest for seeking out more profits overall, we not only abuse the American wage laborers, but we also look for additional, more abusable forms of labor, like H-1B visas or other visa structures, other migrant work visa structures. And that's usually what happens in Europe, by the way, right? Europe utilizes that as a way, and the currency exchange rate is a way to create a more exploitable pool of labor. But in America, we do this third thing where we have undocumented migrants on top of that who have no legal protections whatsoever, right? And they will work for even worse. They will work in even worse conditions, doing backbreaking labor for even lower wages, right? Because of all the factors that I just mentioned and then some. So it is like endlessly hyper exploitative. So there's multiple forms of exploitation, but when from the business owner side, those vectors of pressure create a steadily refreshing pool of talent that will work for much cheaper and engage in backbreaking labor and demand virtually nothing in return because they have no legal protections whatsoever. They don't even have legal protections to exist inside of U.S. borders, right? They don't have legal protections to exist inside of U.S. borders, so they doubly don't have any legal protections in the workplace. So that obviously creates a downward pressure on wages. And in the simplest terms possible, why would you ever hire an American citizen who is not going to want to do this backbreaking labor without like decent benefits and for significantly higher pay. You're gonna hire an undocumented migrant instead. And when the undocumented migrant, after years of toiling the land, finally turns back and says, hey, my back is broken, I would like health care, please. Or, hey, you didn't pay me, week over week. Can I please get the money that you owe me? The boss says, all right, it's time to call ICE and pay the federal government the fee for deportation, only to go back and rehire from the exact labor pool instantly. Do you understand? Because at the end of the day, your bosses want you to work for the least amount of pay they can get away with paying you, the most amount of hours that they can get out of you. You, on the other hand, want to work the least amount of hours for the most amount of pay, right? Make money harder, not smarter. Or make money smarter, not harder. That's it. So they have every incentive to hire undocumented workers. Every incentive. And the system is designed to maintain a healthy flow of undocumented workers coming in and staying undocumented so that they can be endlessly exploited, chewed up, and spit out once these bosses no longer have use for them. It's a disgusting process.
ICE announced more than 500 arrests just yesterday, some of them in Newark, New Jersey. A restaurant owner there says about a dozen agents demanded to see documentation of his employees.
A couple of the guys couldn't show their identification. 3 of them got arrested. 26 years in business, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, but you don't understand, dude. Those guys were all rugged criminals, you know? It's not your barback. He's actually a scary guy, you know?
Now, Newark's mayor says ICE officers, quote, unlawfully terrorized his city and detained undocumented residents as well as some U.S. citizens. CNN has been unable to independently verify that, but the mayor is expected to speak later on this morning.
Chicago public school officials telling us federal agents showed up at the door today but were turned away. And now, in the last few minutes, a rather wild development.
Hi, Joe. We just received a statement from the Department of Homeland Security who told us that there were no immigration enforcement actions at or near a school in the entire city of Chicago today. Very confusing after CPS came out and told us that ICE was here on campus trying to gain access to the school. And then we reached out to ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement federal agency, who told us they were not here today. The principal of the school came out and told us that ICE was here at the school trying to gain access around 11:15 this morning. And they said they did not gain entry. They were stopped at the front by.
There's also another part of this story that I think is also kind of like indecent, by the way. Those of you who are paying attention, it's something that I didn't even consider until I saw a journalist talk about the responsibility in reporting these ICE agents or the ICE raids ahead of time. It's not impersonators. No, I think right now they want to instill fear. One, for marketing to the base to say like, see, we're doing it. We're doing the violent stuff so that people can say it's Trump's golden age. Finally, America's golden age is upon us. But it's also to create fear in the hearts of the undocumented migrants in general, that their apprehension will come one day, even if they're not going to do a raid. So basically that's what they're considering this as, like an additional deterrent, I guess, that anytime and anywhere that you're at, you are at fear of deportation. You are at fear. You should always be fearful of like the violent protocols of deportation. And I think that the media is, if they don't take it seriously, sometimes I think the media is also beefing up this paranoia. But it's a unique situation because like your job is to obviously cover this stuff. And I totally understand why you would cover this stuff, right? Because like, come on, if you're doing raids, like someone has to cover it. But also, if ICE raids are not taking place and you're actually covering it as though they might, then you are kind of creating fear and creating a sense of panic too. It's awful because there's not really, like, what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? It's a real damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Do you understand what I'm saying? So apparently Secret Service responded to Chicago school agency said mid reports of ICE encounter. A spokesperson for the Secret Service said the agency was investigating a threat to one of our protectees in reference to a TikTok ban. So maybe someone at the school made a threat or something to a politician. Oh my God. Okay. So here's what most likely happened. Someone at that school made a threat on social media. Someone at that school made a threat on social media against a politician. Yeah, there it is. It was an 11-year-old. Child Protective Services initially said agents who identified themselves as ICE arrived at Hamline Elementary School in the back of the yards Friday, but it was actually Secret Service agents looking for an 11-year-old who posted an anti-Trump video, a CPS source said. U.S. Secret Service agents, not Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, arrived at a CPS elementary school in back of the yards Friday, but were turned away by school administrators, officials said. That's insane, bro. Brother, not that insane, okay? It's not. Oh, not Child Protective Services, Chicago Public Schools. My bad. Sorry, CPS. Chicago Public Schools. You're right. Dumbass, it's Chicago Public Schools. Yes. I apologize for being stupid. Chicago Public Schools officials initially reported the ICE agents were turned away. This is why instead of CPS, you don't start off with CPS. You say Chicago Public Schools, and then in parentheses, you bracket it as CPS. So then the rest of the article, when you say CPS, everyone knows you're referencing not Child Protective Services, but the Chicago Public Schools. That's what you're supposed to do editorially, for the record, if you're writing an article. There is a reason for why they do it that way, but they didn't do it this way. They wrote CPS everywhere in the beginning, and then only after they wrote Chicago Public Schools right here. Anyone that's done any writing, professional writing, knows that that's what you're supposed to do. Anyway, whatever, it's fine. But I guess it's because it's a Chicago it's a Chicago publication. People understand, like the context is baked into it for the readers. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's my fault regardless. A spokesman for ICE denied the agency visited the school Friday afternoon, according to the Sun Times. It was actually U.S. Secret Service agents who visited the school, CBS source said, and ABC7 Chicago reported. Federal agents arrived at the school as they were searching for an 11-year-old who posted an anti-Trump video, according to a CPS source. Agents have visited a home and were told the person was a student at Hamline, the source said. The principal said school administrators followed protocols and did not allow the agents inside the school. ICE officials did not immediately respond to questions from Block Club. In an interview with MSNBC, Chicago Public School CEO Pedro Martinez said the officers presented credentials to school leaders and identified themselves as ICE. Student and staff inside the school were safe during the encounter, officials said. More than 90% of Hamline students are Latino, and about 2/3 are English learners, according to the district data. They kept the agents outside of the school and contacted CPS Law Department and CPS Office of Safety and Security for further guidance. Agents were not permitted to speak to any of the students or staff, Fergus said. Teaching and learning continued throughout the day at Hamline. Hamline Elementary School Principal Natasha Ortega said the school's security and clerks followed the district's protocols. Due to that, we were able to ensure the safety of our school and all of our students. See, something isn't adding up here? No, something is absolutely adding up. Oh, because you're saying that they identify themselves as ICE instead of Secret Service. Is that what you're saying? I mean, they might have misunderstood the credentials and thought that they were saying ICE instead of Secret Service, especially at this stage. One, ICE is not going to lie. I don't think they have no reason to lie and be like, oh no, we went to a school. Like, no, they want it. They want you to fear that schools are not safe either. So I think that, I mean, ICE lies all the time, make no mistake, but I'm saying like they wouldn't lie against their better judgment, against their best interests here. I do, however, think at this stage in the deportations, they're probably only going to go after W's, like things that they can present as a victory to claim that like there is, you know, 1 million undocumented migrants that are violent criminals that have simply not been apprehended by law enforcement in this country right now, right? So I think at this stage they're going to still like they'll go to some local businesses. They'll have like one guy with a bench warrant or something. You know what I mean? Anything in sanctuary cities. Let's continue.
IPS staff, as is their protocol.
Our security.
Why are they going after a literal child? That makes sense. Child or not, if someone has done like, if someone has said something threatening to a political figure, the Secret Service will investigate it 100%. It doesn't mean that you'll go to jail or something, but they absolutely will investigate it.
Security clerk team followed the protocols that we've been trained and practiced and have discussed.
Wasn't it just an anti-Trump post? No, No. Secret Service does not have enough resources to go after every anti-Trump poster, especially 11-year-olds. That 11-year-old probably said something like that he was going to kill Trump or something like that.
Now, right now, it is not clear who those officers were, how many people were here, if they were looking for anyone in particular, or if they had a warrant to do so with them. We tried asking CPS those questions, and they have not told us those specifics. Coincidentally, the CEO of Chicago Public Schools, Pedro Martinez, sent out this letter to parents today, adding, quote, "As we've said many times, CPS does not ask for the immigration status of our students or families and will not cooperate with immigration and Customs Enforcement or ICE agents who come to our school unless they have a criminal judicial warrant signed by a federal judge. Even in that rare instance, we have a team of lawyers available at all times to review those warrants." Now, this is one community that has been particularly concerned about ICE's arrival. Neighbors telling us they ran outside when they started to hear commotion in light of President Trump's immigration-related executive orders, now allowing ICE agents into schools and churches and promises of mass deportations. The president of Chicago's Teachers Union says this has never happened before.
Look, this is unprecedented. This is something that none of us have ever dealt with. So we are.
Schools shouldn't announce this, but just do it. No, it's important for schools to announce it. Are you kidding me? You want to be able to continue sending your child to school and not fear that, like, the adults that you are giving legal guardianship over to your child are not going to, give up your child to the authorities. So no, it's good that the school is coming out and making a strong statement on this stuff. This is the same principle behind like sanctuary cities in general, right? When you think about it, on its face, you're like, why is there such a concept called sanctuary cities? Like, people don't understand it. Little do they know, sanctuary cities was initially advocated for and implemented by federal and local law enforcement agencies. This is often forgotten in, the modern political discourse. Sanctuary cities comes across as like the invention of wokes, but it's actually born out of necessity. Knowing that there are millions of undocumented migrants living inside of the U.S. borders, a lot of cities that have a high density of undocumented migrants had issues where undocumented migrants are oftentimes in poorer neighborhoods and are more likely to be victims of crime by other undocumented migrants in many instances, because you do crimes to your neighbors in general. You do violence to the people closest to you in most circumstances, just how crime works, right? So basically, it would interfere in any sort of detective work and any sort of real police work. And it ended up causing undocumented migrants to get away with crime, oftentimes crime committed against other undocumented migrants. So basically, federal and local law enforcement pushed for sanctuary cities so that they would give assurances to the victims that they would not be unfairly prosecuted and that there would be no cooperation with ICE, and that you could freely talk to the police without fear that you might be apprehended and deported, right? This is for both victims and witnesses, exactly. Do you understand? Because if you're fearful that if you talk to a cop and they find out that you're undocumented, even though you were a witness of a heinous crime, for example, right? You're less likely to speak to the police. You're less likely to give evidence that might serve. What? Remember when Asmongold painted with a broad brush and got banned? I watch a variety of streamers, including Zachar Asmongold, and you, but I will never be announcing because of who I choose to watch. Watch your brushstroke, man. Lol. Dude, I said the nicest. I was the most careful in my statement. I said Asmongold is welcoming a lot of awful people into his community, because he thinks he's like just being, a little edgy, even if he doesn't fully subscribe to this ideology. And people still got mad at me for this. It's crazy. Like, that's crazy. I'm not saying if you watch Asmongold, you're a Nazi, dumbass. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that if you entertain those kinds of crowds, okay, by making edgy jokes or whatever, you're inevitably going to welcome those crowds into your community and say, like, no, you're welcome here. You can be in here. It's fine. And inevitably, the dynamic of your community will change. There are varying degrees of different political opinions in this great landscape of American politics. Not every single person is a card-carrying, ideologically invested white nationalist neo-Nazi. But there are people like that. And the people like that want to actively recruit. And that's all they care about. And they will do everything in their power to continuously recruit. They will lie. They will obfuscate. They will focus on shared opinions. And there's plenty of shared opinions on that side of the political equation, because a lot of right-wing opinions, when exhausted to its logical conclusion, do end up in the fascist ideology, in the realm of fascist ideology. And that's how it works. Prominent former neo-Nazis have written extensively about this process, about how they realized that it was incredibly easy to infiltrate Republican politics and Republican communities because of how many of the shared values that they have. This does not mean that every Republican is a card-carrying Nazi. As a matter of fact, many Americans hate Nazis, right? Or at least they think they hate Nazis.
Now, to reiterate, lots of confusion here on the ground. Department of Homeland Security again has said that there were no immigration actions at this school or in the entire city of Chicago at a school.
So far for the tolerant left. That's so funny. We're firmly planted in 2016 again, permanently. It's not even so far as so much for the tolerant left.
School today, ICE says they were not here, but again, CPS and the principal of Hamline Elementary says they saw ICE agents here this morning. We're in the back of the Yards neighborhood. Sabrina Franza, CBS News, Chicago.
Now, it's important to take note that, like, while ICE said that they didn't do this still goes along with the other thing that I was talking about, which is that even if it's not ICE doing it, it doesn't matter, because it still benefits the purpose of the administration, which is to instill fear, right? So here's Stephen Miller, I believe, talking about this. Here it is. Fox, ICE agents were denied entry to an elementary school in Chicago. Let's take a look at what Stephen Miller had to say about this exact story that we just listened to.
But I want to just give you something that we just got moments ago from ABC is reporting this, and that's all I've got on it so far. ICE agents denied entry to a Southside elementary school in the Chicago public school system, and they're saying that they followed protocols, the principal says, and did not allow the agents inside. Are you aware of that situation, and is that something that is acceptable? We've heard talk about schools and churches as sanctuary spots.
There's no sanctuary for
He's a Jew, bro. Yeah, Stephen Miller is Jewish. And Stephen Miller is also still very much a Nazi. I'm sorry. Stephen Miller has often credited what was the book that Stephen Miller talks about? Like he literally credits a very prominent white nationalist book. Was it Camp of the Saints? Yeah. Stephen Miller and the Camp of the Saints. Like, My man has stated, but last week Southern Poverty Law Center detailed leaked emails in which Miller encouraged far-right website Breitbart to promote white supremacist ideas. In one message, Miller references a book of fiction. Someone should point out the parallels to Camp of the Saints. Like, he literally is he's a Turner Diaries and Camp of the Saints stan. So yes, you can be Jewish and still be a straight-up Nazi. Stephen Miller is.
Aliens in this country, nor is there a sanctuary for child trafficking, for child smuggling, or for child endangerment. ICE officers will take the actions necessary to protect the lives and safety of our children and to identify individuals who are involved in the smuggling and trafficking of our children in order to conduct...
Like, I'll keep it $150. You know, like how I talked a lot about like the real interests of corporations here, and how our bosses, corporate owners, like they don't necessarily care about, like, they don't want all migrants to be deported from this country, right? And how their ultimate goal is profit. They want to keep migrants undocumented so they can have a steady pool of exploitable labor. Stephen Miller is not in that camp. He is in the camp of, I want every brown person to be violently stripped away of their rights and deported from this country. Like, if given the opportunity, I think if Stephen Miller had all power, I mean, he has a tremendous amount of power, obviously, already. But if he was like the one guy that had a magic wand, I think he would 100% put every migrant that is brown and black into camps.
And to identify individuals who are involved in the smuggling and trafficking of our children in order to...
Trafficking of our children.
Conduct these investigations.
We must secure a future for our children.
In order to protect the safety and security of children all across America, federal law enforcement needs unrestricted access to conduct basic investigations.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, that's my point. Like, he doesn't know the exact details. He doesn't know that it was ICE agents, but he's still taking credit over it. Why is he doing that? The Trump admin officially denying that the ICE raid ever took place to MSNBC, sending Stephen Miller to gloat over the attempted raid on Fox. There it is. Why is he doing that? This goes along with what I was saying earlier, which is that even if it's not a real ICE raid, when the media reports an ICE raid that is imminent in a place like Chicago, for example, that actually still serves their purpose. They can instill fear in the undocumented migrant population. They can instill fear in the hearts of migrants and even just like other brown people that aren't migrants. You could be a documented immigrant. You could be just a regular old natural born U.S. citizen who is also kind of Hispanic looking. You're still going to be fearful that like ICE might come and you know, put you in this like involuntary hold, unjustifiable detention with complete denial of due process. It's already happened in New Jersey, like to that U.S. veteran, obviously, as we talked about, right? But the goal is, even if the raids are not conducted, the fear that a raid could have happened creates a sense of unsafety, creates a sense of panic and instability. And I mean, it's just terrorizing people. That's the goal. It also serves a propaganda purpose for your base because your base demands this kind of violence. So then you can just take credit over it and say, see, we're doing it. We're doing the damn thing. Social media has been flooded with posts about Navajo citizens being detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and questioned about their U.S. citizenship. Navajo Nation leaders address reports of ICE detaining tribal citizens. Now, make no mistake, when Operation WB was happening in America, something that Donald Trump actually positively covered over and over again and routinely said he wanted to do when he was running for office, when he was running for president, that was also a gruesome process of deportation that led to 1.3 million Mexicans and Americans of Mexican descent being forcibly deported, and not just Mexicans, but like Latin Americans. And there was a ton of American citizens that were deported in the process too. They were just Hispanic or Latino. And the same is happening here as well. Like these guys seemingly are not super invested in the immigration status of a person. Do you understand? They're operating not on the basis of like your immigration status. They're simply coming after you if you look the part. That's it. And how do you figure out when someone looks the part? Well, they're not white. That's the reason why Navajo Nation leaders are getting arrested and being detained, or Navajo Nation people are being detained. Of course, in this process, everyone will say, well, it's common sense. They will try to common sensify racial profiling, even though it's supposed to be unconstitutional. Do you understand? I know this from personal experience. They did this with Islamophobia. Come on, man, it's common sense. Who is more responsible for terrorism, Muslims or random white people? And if you look at the actual data, the likelihood that an act of domestic terror is happening on U.S. soil is conducted by a white nationalist, anti-government extremist, or like someone who is, you know, a neo-Nazi is infinitely higher, like infinitely, unimaginably higher than it being conducted in the hands of a Muslim. The NOLA terror attack was unique. I'll take it one step further. There was a school shooting that took place in Antioch, conducted by a black white supremacist. That sounds insane, right? This happened like 2 days ago, and it got very little media coverage overall. That person was connected to the previous female school shooter, also in which state was it? The previous female school shooter, they operated in the same exact terrorgrams. Like they operated in the same Telegram channels where neo-Nazis straight up groom mentally ill American kids and mentally ill kids all around the globe, as a matter of fact, to do acts of terror. There was one act of terror that came from that terrorgram that happened in Turkey, in Eskişehir. Those are all still right-wing, far-right, anti-government, white nationalist instances of terror. Think about that. Trump administration has invoked a decades-old, never been before invoked legal authority that permits them to authorize willing state and local enforcement officers, law enforcement officers, to carry out any of the powers, privileges, or duties of an immigration officer, ICE, or Border Patrol, by the way. Yeah, the Antioch high school shooter, Solomon Henderson, made a bunch of references to other shooters taking photos of himself, imitating their poses, and even dressing up as them. Yeah.